Gentlemen, hello, brother. Good to see you, man. For Constable who lives and works in the city. You're about for 2.5. They're going to tell. Oh, they're gone. It's frequently. I'm 3 miles out right now. I'm just way out of town. You're passing no car. Yeah. These guys, I bet you. That's a tough stuff. Especially since it's a big conference side. Oh, that makes it even better. Now, what do you know? Conservative from me. Yes.
Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order. If I could have everyone's attention, if I could have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Sharon, your mic.
Okay, the first thing I'd like to point out is on the board packet information that was supplied, the copies. We do have an error on there. The board agenda said Monday, July 17th. It's actually Tuesday, July 17th, so I just wanted to point that out. Also, I'd like to introduce a new board member that was just appointed to the board, Mr. Constable John Bruno. When we're going through the staff introductions, we'll allow John a couple minutes to give a few words about himself then. If we could start with staff introductions, please, Tracy.
Tracy Klauser, CCB staff.
Wayne Howard, PCCD staff.
Rod Ruddick, Indiana County Commissioner.
Bill White, Pennsylvania State Police.
Sherry Leffler, PCCD staff.
Craig Westover, Constable, Venango County.
John Bruno, Constable, Swadire Township, State Constable for going on 29 years. About 3 years ago, I retired as an investigator with the State Attorney General's Office. I put 30 years in there in the Civil Law Division, and happy to be on the board. Hope to make a positive impact.
John Fowle, PCCD.
Bud Bites, Constable, Allegheny County.
It's okay. Deborah said for Chief Counsel, PCCD.
Merwin, PCCD.
Okay, then we'll start going through the agenda for the meeting. We are going to have public voice at this time for the meeting, so if there's anyone in the audience that would like to get up and address the board with any concerns or issues, now's the time. And please state your name for the record.
Daniel Hollowell, Constable, Adams County, Pennsylvania. I was part of the Constable work groups, and I was just curious. I understand that PCC decided to just pretty much not go with absolutely any of the recommendations. I was wondering, what are we going to do now? And by that I mean, when the budget goes completely dry, do we just stop doing work completely? Are we not certified? Are we going to discuss that today, or does PCCD have a new remedy to get to where we're going?
We have a plan in place. Staff has been working diligently towards that. Basically, out of the commission meeting, they want specific things passed. So what we're gonna be doing today, work our way through that. And so yeah, there is a plan going forward.
And then we're hopeful that those recommendations then will go to the commission at the September meeting then for approval.
Let's go right down the line.
We'll just go down the line.
John Weiser, Commonwealth Constable Association, Adams County. I have a question then. Since it is such a hot topic, I respectfully request that the chairman consider moving public opinion to the end or allowing some time to have that. It's kind of inappropriate to say, well, we have a plan, we're not going to share it with you, and everybody's got to be involved in it, but you can't comment on it after we told you what it is. So I request that the chairman allow time at the end.
And I'll just throw out, we always had public voice at the end, but from the group, from the audience, was brought up that they wanted public voice in the beginning to comment before the board took action or voted on things.
What I'm asking is there, I mean, it's at the discretion of the board to also allow time at the end. So, I mean, it's the acting chairman's.
Well, as it stands right now, nothing is going to be outside of the work groups, you know, the work group decisions. What it is the commission wanted a clear definition. They want the resolutions that we passed or the motions we passed at the last meeting, they felt were too general. And I'm hearing this from the executive director. They were too general in nature, so they were not put in front of the commission as action items. So specifically the action items that they need to see at that September meeting will be based off of what we just did, only we're going to clean it up and make it more specific as to the recommendations. So it came out of the work group situation.
And I respect that and understand that. I still ask the acting chairman to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to allow some time afterwards when you bring that forward. I feel it's only appropriate. We sit here all the time and we say constables need to get involved, you guys need to be a part of it. But so, I mean, if there's something that should be said at the end, if somebody doesn't like it, then they should be allotted that time to say it. So I'm asking the chairman again, would you allow some time at the end?
I don't see a problem with that. I would say this, on the deference to time to get through today, if we can keep this limited to about 3 minutes, okay, then we'll be in better shape for time because, like I said, it's going to take a little while to plow through
Sure, I
all
get
these things.
Thank you, Constable, sir.
Next. Sir.
Constable Richard Saul from Monroe County. I second the idea of having another option for public comment because it was very frustrating to me as a work group member to hear what happened before the meeting when we talked about it. I felt that the work group was not well represented with the group up here talking about what we came together with, and I was very surprised at what was actually voted on to move through to go to PCCD. I was so upset over the whole situation. I confronted you, Mr. Pites, and Judge Barletic afterwards, and I was very surprised that Judge Barletic said, you know what happened, I changed my mind, and he turned around and walked away from me. I don't think that's acceptable. We put a lot of time, our own time, lost our own money from working, come down here, and we put together really good recommendations, and I don't think the board represented that work group in their efforts. So I'm just very surprised at what happened, and I would have loved to have the option to talk and engage with the group. One thing that I felt was pretty inappropriate too is the board briefly went over, you guys summarized what we came up with. And I don't think that was necessary. We came here earlier than what the meeting was supposed to start at, just so we can go over what the work group did. And then we summarized what the work group did in a way that I don't think even represented what we came up with in an appropriate way to people who weren't involved in the work group. So it was very frustrating to not even be able to engage and have any kind of comment while that was going on before the board even made a vote at the last meeting. So I would encourage that, to consider public comment at the beginning of the meeting and at the end, or in a situation where you're going to make a vote on something that important, maybe opening up public comment before that vote is made, maybe on the motion to vote. If the motion carries to make the vote, then have public comment before the vote is actually made. I think it's important. It's our training. It affects us and the future of the constable training, and I think it's important that we have a second.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll be more satisfied at the end of today,
I hope so.
with the specific recommendations going forward. And as far as the setup of the meeting and how it's running at, I don't have a problem at all sitting down and talking with staff and with the other board members to readjust the agenda going forward. Okay, we've been doing this on the fly. I mean, the thing is, I don't like working with our back against the wall, but since I come on board the first of the year, we've got our back to the wall financially, and I want to get past the financial end of it, so that some of these other issues, like you're talking about how the meetings are run, the agenda, all that, we can actually take some time. But right now, everything's been focused up on the financial side to keep the training program going until such time as it financially afloat. So, I don't have a problem with anything you said. Okay. Next, sir.
Ron Quinn, Center County and PFOC. Without getting into what the plan is yet, what was the reason for PCCD's refusal of the course of actions that were recommended?
It wasn't that anybody refused anything. It's that the specific information, they wanted more specifics in the motion that was made for the training going forward. So,
in what areas?
And pretty much across the board. I will say this: when we go through the process today, you'll see where the motions are, for lack of better words, it's going to be more technically done so that the commission totally understands. I spoke in front of the commission for about 15 minutes. The chairman was very gracious in giving me time to at least advise them of our concern and of the urgency. And that was my main thrust for being there, was to express to the commission directly the urgency of our financial situation to get things going forward.
Why would it be gracious of them and stuff? It's their job to hear what we have to recommend, since we're the ones that are providing the guidance for the training and stuff like that, and asking for the training. So why would it be gracious on their part?
Well, the thing is, at this point in time, we don't have a direct seat on the commission board, and I asked for that process. What do we need to do? Because I feel not only us, but the sheriff should have a seat at the commission. And at this time, we don't. So we have to depend on the chain of command, getting the information through. So I feel, that a good step forward for us would be, advocating. And as I understand the process now, it takes an appointment by the governor. So the governor at some point has to be willing to appoint, a member off the training board onto that commission. And that's, the process we'll have to work through to see if we can get that accomplished. I think that it'll clean up communication. I think it'll make it more real time. Let's face it, the financial crisis started in 2007. This hasn't been solved. We've been running a deficit since 2007. So here we are 10, 11 years later. And to be honest with you, with the commission, for some of these folks, may or may not have been aware, financially, how dire they knew there was a problem, but I don't think they had the sense of urgency that we were able to convey directly. And Mr. Merwin, I want you to comment on that, because you were there also and you spoke.
Yeah, so I had provided an overview to the commission, and as indicated, we did take it as an action item, so we did kind of summarize the recommendations that were coming forward. But at that point in time, the commission wasn't taking it as an action item because we needed additional details that we're going to work through today.
How seriously are they taking the sheriff's dilemma? Because from what I've been told in past meetings, the sheriff's department or sheriff's area and stuff training is supposed to be as in dire, if not worse, dire need of revamping and stuff. In which case, then I don't hear any word or anything about their training being halted or they're being decertified or anything of that nature and stuff. So why is there a difference in stuff as far as the
sheriff
emergency?
The sheriff's board is going through the same process.
Yeah, last July, the sheriffs, because their training act says that the training fund has to reimburse the county when a deputy attends training, base salary, etc. The board cut off those reimbursements, and the commission approved that about this time last year in July. So they're suspending any reimbursements to the sheriffs when they send their guys to basic training, which is 19 weeks, etc., until their financial situation is better, and then they can start paying those back. Counties are still filing for those reimbursements, so they're not getting their money. So that program, because they had that and they were able to suspend that, they're probably a little bit behind the constable's program as far as when they're going to run out of money, but they're in the same situation. So things are happening with that program kind of at the same level. So,
Mr. Merwin, you also reported out to them, did you not, or who was it reported out about the deficit? How much money has been accrued that is owed to the counties already by the sheriffs?
Yeah, that was reported out as well.
Yeah.
And that's been in the written materials and also been in multiple reports. So the commission is aware of the the issue of expenses exceeding revenues in both programs.
And one last question. If I could see a show of hands of people who suggested that we change public voice to the beginning of the agenda versus at the end. Well, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. That's all I got.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to follow up on what Constable Salter said, Greg Smith, Franklin County.
Okay.
I know that the last special meeting was bumped to 9 a.m. because of the anticipated additional comment and so forth. It says here it adjourned 10:17. Normal start would be 10 o'clock. We had people walking in and barely able to participate in the meeting because of the time change. I understand today we're starting at 9. It was announced for 9. How long is this anticipated to take?
Don't know. As we plow through, there's 27 pages on the on the packet.
So all I'm saying is let's not rush it.
Like I say,
let's give it the attention we need to.
We've burned almost 20 minutes so far, so that's where we're at right now. Okay.
Yeah, but all the times on the agenda that were published have already for the rest of the year has already been changed to 9 o'clock versus the 10 o'clock, which does not allow the constables that might want to be here and stuff like that because of the earlier hour and stuff. And an hour does make a difference in the travel to Harrisburg. You know, so why the change? The total change to 9 o'clock versus keeping it at 10.
Well, that was done basically because of what needed to be discussed at the meetings, and we wanted to allow time because basically our board members are coming in
at this
the night before. What do you mean at this meeting?
The 9 o'clock change at this meeting on the calendar that's published on the website.
Yes,
it's 9 o'clock for the rest of the year.
For the rest of the year, yes.
So right. That's what I'm saying is why the 9 o'clock, why the hour earlier change. Because it goes beyond just this meeting. Now we're talking about future meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
Concern of we're going to have a lot of issues over the next year to discuss. A lot of things are going to happen. There's probably going to be more than just the quarterly meeting. You know, when the program first started, to get it up and running for about the first 2 years, the board was meeting almost every month and a half, just because there were so many issues that they had to deal with. And I would say that over the next year or so, probably the same thing's going to be happening. We'll have additional meetings. We'll have meetings starting at 9 because we want to allow enough time to discuss the issues and get through what we need to.
Anyone else? Sir.
Yeah, Barry Krasowitz, Monroe County. First, I'd like to voice my agreement with Constables Weiser, Salter, and Quinn that having the public voices in the beginning of the meeting before anything is discussed, I don't see any wisdom in that at all. It's very hard to comment on something that's not been discussed yet. So I strongly encourage you folks to have the public comment other than in the beginning of the meeting. But that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
Thank you. Is somebody else?
Anyone else?
Okay. All right, then we'll move on from public voice to action items. Sherry?
The first action item on the agenda will be the unapproved draft minutes of the May 10th, 2018 meeting. Are there any questions, concerns, comments from the board?
Everybody get a chance to review the minutes? So a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
That was second. Second. Any further question? All those in favor, roll call vote.
Start with Commissioner Ruddick. Roll call vote, please.
Here.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion
All in
passes.
favor. The next action item on the agenda, I'm going to pass that off to Wayne for instructor certification.
Yeah, we only have 2 instructor certifications. Both of them are currently existing instructors. The first is for Temple University, Louis Mancini, currently teaching general. He's requested certification in physical skills. His occupation, he's with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He has a master's degree, graduated from Troy University, 24 years of law enforcement experience, 2 years of instructional experience. His last instructional assignments were regional defensive tactic control tactics, and he also teaches for the Constable's Education and Training Program. Staff would recommend certification for Louis Mancini for physical skills certification. The second one is a transfer. Craig Westover, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Previous topics were general law, communication, physical skills, and firearms. Those were all that he's requesting to be recertified for IUP. He's currently a Pennsylvania State Constable, 23 years of law enforcement experience, 18 years of instructional experience, and he's taught for the program, Constable's Education and Training Program, for several years. We did receive all the updated certifications, and the program staff recommends board certification for Craig Westover for Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
I'll abstain from that. Go ahead and call the motion.
Can I hear a motion to approve these two instructors?
I'll make a motion to approve. I second it.
And can I do a roll call vote, please, starting with Bud?
Aye. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Roll call.
Roll call vote for that motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Aye.
All in favor, thank you. The next action item on the agenda is going to be the short-term courses of action, and as Constable Westover relayed earlier, we are going to take each of the action items, or take the short-term courses of action that were approved at the May meeting, and we're basically going to break them down individually and discuss, have any other recommendations, and then we will vote on each one of those as a separate action item, so that could then go forth to the commission in September. I'll go first with the first course of action. At the May meeting, the board had voted to suspend all firearms training for calendar year 2019, and then the board would revisit this issue during the 2019 board meetings. The current firearms certifications will expire on December 31st of 2019, and the board's goal is to resume basic firearms training and certification and some form of annual firearms certification in 2020. We've also put in there the section of the Act and the section of the regulations pertaining to firearms. Do you want me to just go ahead? I'll go through everything.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Title 44, Section 7148, Use of Firearms, states the Constable's Education and Training Board, with the review and approval of the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, shall establish standards for the certification or qualification of constables and deputy constables to carry or use firearms in the performance of any duties. The regulations then state, and that would be Title 37, Section 431.41, Qualification Course. Subsection B, after a constable attains initial firearms qualification, the constable shall complete the board's annual firearms qualification course to maintain firearms qualification. Staff have gone through some different options for the firearms certification, and we've listed those there as well. Additional firearms certification options would be extend all current constable's firearms certification through December 31st of 2020. Accept another Commonwealth firearms certification for 2020 in lieu of Act 49 firearms certification. But there could also be a possible issue with the Supreme Court rules stating that Act 49 training, firearms certification, and qualification are required under the Supreme Court rules. Subsection C would be to implement a show and shoot, which would be a 4-hour qualification only, and this would be for 2019 or 2020. The cost savings of suspending all firearms training was projected to be at $492,324. Conducting a 4-hour show and shoot for approximately 1,000 constables would cost us approximately $81,601, reducing that savings to $410,723. Subsection D, under the suspension of firearms, based on a constable's enrollment prior to January 1 of 2020, the board could extend the individual's constable's firearms certification until the end of the firearms training class that they attend and attempt to qualify in 2020. So there we've given the board several options on how we can accomplish either the suspension or extending of certification or the option of the show and shoot. And I do want to point out that option for the show and shoot was actually something that came out of those work group meetings that we had earlier in the year. And that was actually identified as a long-term course of action. But staff felt that it was important to bring that back as well, based upon what the actual regulations and acts say in regards to a qualification course.
Sherry, I just want to say to the board and Craig, if you have anything to add, I think bottom line is the commission did not want to see any suspension of firearms qualification of any. So some form of standard continued from the board. And again, so that's why we put in there about either the show and shoot or accepting on a temporary basis other Commonwealth. And we do have in the packet a comparison of some of the Commonwealth firearms certifications. So, we can use that as a reference of what's required for each, how often they shoot, etc. So.
Yeah, if you'd like to look at page 16 of the board packet, that's where we have the firearms comparison, which shows a comparison between, as John said, the other major firearms training and certification entities within the Commonwealth. It goes through the Constables program, which is housed here at PCCD, the Deputy Sheriffs, which is also housed here. We looked at the County Probation and Parole, Act 120, Act 235, PSP training, Game Commission training, and Fish and Boat Commission training for firearms.
Guess what we found out? It's all over the board. It is all over the board. There is no standardization across the state with these programs. I mean, really, there's quite a diversification from program to program as far as hours of training, amount of rounds, what they train on. So at least it gives us a feel going forward what programs might be acceptable for a waiver and what may not be. Madam Solicitor, as far as the change to a 4-hour show and shoot, do you think that'll make the commission more comfortable?
I have to say that is the only one of the options that you have listed that I think could sail through without a problem. That's basically the only one that I see that does not have a problem with either the regs or Act 49. The show and shoot is about qualification, and that is basically the only firearms requirement under the law and the regs, that there will be annual qualification. And it is up to the board to decide how many hours or what nature that qualification is. So I think that C, as the staff recommends, is a good option for the board, and it passes legal muster.
Mr. Merwine, your thoughts? You deal with the commission a lot more than what we do.
Yeah, and we've had conversations with some of the commission members, because I had several advisory committees that I provide oversight to as well. And I believe that they would be more comfortable with this approach than extending the certification with no qualification occurring in 2019.
Questions from the board? Do you have a recommendation either way? Anybody want to make a motion to approve show and shoot qualification only for 2019 as recommended by the staff?
Just a question, Chair. I want to make sure I'm clear on what we're looking at here. There are certain action items here that we have not discussed. Is this action item separate from those other action items, or are they connected? If they're connected, I think we should review every action item and go back and pick out the one which we feel supportive of. I mean, that's how I would see this. Am I off base on that?
Well, all the action items are actually the short-term courses of action that the board approved in May. And we've just broken them out into each individual action item.
They can be done separate.
Yeah, they can be done separately, yes.
All right, just to make sure we can.
Yeah.
Anything else, John?
Good.
Major?
If a person shows up and isn't able to qualify, are they required to come back?
Right. Under current practice, they come to the 20 hours, they get 16 hours of training, and then basically do the qualification. If they fail, they would have to sign up for another class and pay. So that board regulation really wouldn't change. If you didn't qualify, you can sign up for another class and pay for it and get another attempt. You get a second attempt that day. You go through twice, that's it. But if you don't make it through the second time, then you can take a second class down the road.
Yeah, I guess to me the difference is, and I'm assuming there was training associated with that class. So
right.
If I signed up for a second class, I get some type of training to help me improve my proficiency with the firearm.
Yeah, this would just be literally that. All we'd offer is you show up, you sign up for a certain block of time to come and qualify, and you come in cold. Our advanced firearms training is like that. If you sign up for the advanced firearms, you come in, after basic safety stuff, first thing you do is qualify. And if you pass, then you continue on to whatever the training topic is for that year. Shoot and move or whatever. But that, the advanced shooters have done well with that. We typically don't have guys, fail out of that because they come in and they practice. I think for this, the general population, you will see a spike in failures. Because right now, first go around, but it's after 16 hours of range training, about 95% of the guys pass first go around. They'll pass. But I think a lot of that has to do with they get refresher training. So.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with, getting the extra attempt and whatever. I mean, my fear is that there's nothing in place for a person who fails, and then what happens if they don't qualify?
Right.
Well, I mean, I'm asking, what happens if I go through my qualification and I don't qualify after my second attempt or my third attempt? What happens to me as a constable?
Right. As of right now, based on your previous qualifications. So if I take it pass in 2018 and then I go to show and shoot in 2019 and I fail, based on 2018, I'm still good through December 31st. However, the board, individually, people have brought up about changing that. So if I show and shoot in 2019 and I fail, my firearm certification's turned off. Doesn't change my basic certification to work in the courts, but my ability to carry a firearm under the Act is impacted. So that's something the board, and part of that is we needed some decisions out of this meeting so we can draft a change to that policy to bring to you in August. So we can change it if the board wants to implement starting in 2019.
Well, is there going to be anything offered if I go through my qualification, I can't qualify. I did do a second attempt, can't qualify. I come back another time, can't qualify. Is there at least anything that I can pay for myself? I can pay $100, go to someone, and they can help me get to that point. Is there anything in place for the people that are struggling?
At this point, the staff had not put that into the equation.
And
that's
They have to go to a private entity to get that.
Yeah, if I could add to, this was one of the main topics that we talked about in the work group as well, that the work group members felt that the constables need to take more responsibility before they come to the training classes and be more prepared when they come to the firearms classes.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. I actually agree with that. I guess I'm just worried about the people that are struggling out there. To me, at least, they need to have another option, even if it's, hey, you need to go to an NRA course.
Right.
Here's.
And there's plenty of those courses available.
I know there are. It's just, I feel like there's got to be something in place that we can either have on the website or provide that information to say, here's the upcoming NRA courses for.
Okay,
whatever.
we can make information available
Yes,
what
we
they can do.
We spin it back around, we're still on the short term.
No, I understand.
In the financial side of things. But the flip side is if they fail in a gunfight before the training, they fail the training, they fail in the gunfight prior to the training. So if anything, hopefully it'll put some self-responsibility back that, hey, I need to stay proficient out on the street because I need to pass that next gunfight. Because if I can't pass it to fall, I got a real problem with the gunfight.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with any of those things. I just want to make sure that we have
resources available, other resources available. Right. Yeah, we could definitely do that.
The ultimate goal is going to be to get to the long term where we can have enough finances available that we can offer the level of training that we did prior to, with the firearms, and have that additional training. But to get through to that point, 2020, 2021, this is sort of the pain that we've got to go through for 19 in order to make this work.
And the transition, yeah.
The transition.
Understood.
Brennan.
Well, I think that the show and shoot may be the only way to go right now. Once again, liability is a big concern. Going down the path. So, but I do want to comment on what you just said there, and I think it is important to have something available for individuals that are struggling, whether or not it's, you said recommendation to an NRA course, or even some sort of other state agency that may be able to help out the struggling constable. So, those are my thoughts. Okay.
Possible.
How are you?
Good.
Okay. You know what? Maybe we should look into like Temple, Penn State, IUP, and if somebody can't pass, instead of sending them, like the NRA, maybe they can line a couple of their instructors up for a fee to give them, the skills necessary to pass that qualification. Because I'll tell you what, the instructors, I've dealt with instructors from IUP, I've dealt with instructors from Penn State, excellent instructors. They can give you the tips, they can give you the knowledge, the skills necessary to pass that test. And, take it upon the college itself, say, hey, you know what, for $100 or $150, we can get you a one-day class or a two-day class to get your proficiency up. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at that angle versus sending some independent.
Well,
would there be a fee that Temple or IUP would charge?
Sure,
So when
they
you
could
pay
charge.
what about the program? It would be just those
No,
universities.
this would be a fee. No, this would be a fee to, say for instance, I can't pass, okay, and I failed 2 or 3 times now. I would contact IUP, Penn State, and they would have a few of their, people, and for a fee that I would pay, they could assign me to a class on a Saturday or Sunday or whatever, at my own expense, not through the organization.
and I was going to say, and you brought it up, I didn't want to bring it up, but I'm confident that there are training entities out there that would fill the void in that interim year or two that we're not providing training. I mean, we changed training providers a couple years ago, and they had done a lot of firearms training for us, and so then they basically started providing a lot of private citizen firearms training because they had a nice new facility, et cetera. So I'm confident that people will step up and fill that void. Training will be available. You guys might have to shop around,
And
but
I would like to see, and again, I can't tell IUP or Temple or Penn State, hey, you got to step up and do this. It's up to that individual school, okay, and see if they want to do a proposal. And I think versus an independent outfit, it might be more financially accommodating to an individual to go through one of their courses. Again, they got some of the best instructors out there.
Anyone else on board?
Perhaps we could provide maybe a list too of different entities out there or individuals to come to my mind right away is Lanco Tactical, and instructor that I used quite frequently in the past was a guy by the name of Bernie Bernholtz. But I'm sure there's others out there. Perhaps we can, solicit some information and provide a list on our website for these individuals to reach out.
Okay, so what's the board's pleasure? Do I have a motion to go with the board recommendation, staff recommendation? Board provides a 4-hour show and shoot qualification line for 2019.
I'll make a motion.
Motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Any further questions?
I just want to go back. I think the question was asked. I just want to verify. What does that do from a liability standpoint for this board?
Deborah, would you like to address that?
I'm sorry, I didn't
What-
get the end of your question.
All I want to know is I want to make sure that if we do this, we are protected from a liability standard, because we are then deciding how this is going to occur. Is that going to be sufficient from a liability point of view that we are not creating a problem for ourselves?
Well, it has always been within the purview of the board to fashion what is required for the qualifications course, so that doesn't change. So the question is whether or not this is adequate or this is sufficient would be kind of on a case-by-case basis, just like any other lawsuit that would occur. So one side would have an expert to say 4 hours qualification is not sufficient. This side, we would hire an expert to say that yes, it is. It's that sort of thing. That would be getting into the, I guess, the expertise of people who handle firearms, whether or not 4 hours of qualification is sufficient. That's not so much a legal question as one of your own expertise.
Yeah, I understand.
And I was not at the work group meetings or whatever, but I'm just relying on the vetting and the conversation and the discussion that has gone into this, that you experts consider that 4 hours of qualification is adequate. But what this doesn't say is it doesn't rule out the training. So I think what would happen as this goes forward and staff and the board work together to look at, well, what is the alternative training, that would be a different set of standards. And maybe those standards might have to be tougher when looking at what other programs offer, since you are going to have a smaller qualification piece. But the cynical answer is everything you do increases the chances of liability. That is the truth. But it has always been the case that the board has the power under the law to fashion qualifications.
So we're looking at this as really a minimum expectation to get us through the period of time in which we are trying to right our financial status. Is that correct?
To be revisited.
Well, I think the reason I'm saying is on behalf of the constable, when you think about it, if this is successful, why would you do it every year? I mean, that's the point I'm making.
Absolutely. Are you soliciting comment?
No, I'm not. I'm sort of just
the training
thinking
is
out
a
loud.
separate component. When you look at the statute, the qualification course is what the board is responsible for. The training is an add-on that the board did with available funds at the time to bolster the qualification.
And litigation-wise or liability-wise, if you look at all the different training programs across the state for all the different agencies, it's all over the board. And seriously, if the state of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth, said there's one standard qualification and training provided for every agency out there, everybody's on the same page. If we truly got to that point, then these issues, as she's talking about, looking at case-by-case basis, that's really what we're going to be looking at. Because they're also going to be looking at, well, what's this agency? What's that agency? What's that agency? You know, their training. So that's why this thing gets so muddy, you know, as far as...
Well, I think that's a step we could take, is to maybe do a further study and engage those other organizations to sit down and figure out, is there a common ground? But right now, that's not going to happen in the time frame we're talking about, and I realize that. So all I'm trying to do is protect the integrity of the system we currently have now, protecting the interest of those who serve, and try to get over the hump that we are financially. So, and I'm not hearing anything that would suggest that there's a problem with that.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Anything further? All those in favor, roll call vote.
Yep. Commissioner, if we could start with you for a roll call, please.
Aye.
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 All in favor? We will move on to the next action item. Now this was also part of the short-term courses of action that was approved at the May meeting, to suspend the 80-hour basic training and 40-hour basic firearms training for training year 2019. The board will review reestablishing basic training and basic firearms during the 2019 board meeting. So it will be revisited. All of these things will be rehashed again next year. Title 44, Section 7145, which is the program contents. The Constable's Education and Training Program shall include training for a total of 80 hours, the content of which shall be determined by regulation. The training shall include instruction in the interpretation and application of the fees provided for in Section 7161 relating to fees. Under the regulations, Title 37, 431.41 qualification course. A constable shall complete a basic firearms qualification course established by the board to attain initial firearms qualification. And then what we did is we provided some basic training stats. So for training year 2016, which was a big election year, we had trained 379 constables. 328 of those became certified. 51 of those did not become certified. In that year, of those that were trained in 2016, there were only 2 that had done work for the courts in 2017. When we look at 2017, we trained 98 constables, 82 of which became certified, 16 of which did not become certified, and none of those individuals were working for the courts in 2017. 2018, so far this year, we have trained 46. Of those 46, we've had 39 that have become certified, and 7 have not become certified. Now, we do have another basic training class starting in August here in the central part of the region, and I believe at last count we had 36 in that class, correct? So there would be another 36 additional constables that will be getting trained this year. The staff recommendation is to suspend the 80-hour basic training and the 40-hour basic firearms for training year 2019. Would any of the board like to discuss any other options?
So I asked the question on 2016, 379 trained, 328 certified, 51 not certified, and 2 ended up working for the courts in 17. We have record through AOPC.
Yes, correct.
That their cert number had actually served paper. So those that year took 12 classes to accomplish that. The average cost of those classes was $15,000. So we spent $180,000 in 2016 for basic training and produced 2 folks that work for the courts. That to me is the only reason that was brought up under this format was to show you that we believe that we can suspend that 80-hour basic training program and the 40-hour basic firearms for 2019 financially to give us a break on money, because we're not seeing where it'll be a major impact on the courts. The number that troubles me is the not certified, the ones that actually took the training but then didn't follow through. Either they got their insurance or they're bonding, or for whatever reason they did not end up getting their certification number, or they dropped that. And I think during the work groups, that's one of the things we talked about was not a pre-screen where prior to signing for basic training, you'll have available by going onto the system a video or a PowerPoint that's going to talk about, all the requirements necessary to be certified, go through the basic training process and get certified. So they have at least that information in mind, because unfortunately, some of those folks that took the class took a slot that somebody else wanted to sign up for, and you can see that with 36 being, signed up now for this next basic training. If we had 51 people in 16 that didn't follow through, could we have knocked that number down by at least having them access some sort of an educational tool prior to getting involved in the basic training? But in fact, we had people who dropped out 1 or 2 classes in, the first weekend, they dropped that. So that slot was effectively taken and tied up, and nobody was there. So I think that's a stat that we wanted to at least go over, and you see the impact of financially against the program, $180,000 that year that was spent. So, I mean, if we had a lot of money, but we don't. So those dollars do count. They do count. And they make the difference as to how much training we provide for the constables that are out there working.
Any other discussion, questions, comments? Can I get a motion for this action item?
So the recommendation is the board suspends 80-hour basic training, 40-hour basic firearms for training year 2019. So a motion to that effect. Also moved. Do I have a second? Okay, motion dies.
Okay, we will move on to the third action item, the elimination of the optional training classes effective January 1st of 2019. The optional training enrollments are less than 2% of the total constable population. and these less than lethal force options certifications are obtainable at the local level. This has been brought before the board many other occasions, but we are bringing it forth as a cost-saving initiative for 2019. Staff recommendation would be asking the board to eliminate the optional training classes. Any discussion, questions, comments on this motion?
So basically, we're talking expendable baton.
Mm-hmm. And
OC.
Chemical aerosol.
But they can get that certification somewhere else if they want.
Yes. And that's why it's such a lesser degree of enrollments, because it is available at the local level and they choose to go to their local police department and pay $10 to get recertified, that type of thing.
And what's the savings that we look as a result of this action?
Well, I think when we had looked, and correct me, Sherry.
Yeah, it was 11.
Yeah, it was around 10 or 11,000. Because as Sherry said, over the last couple of years, we've brought it before the board in the past, just because it was it's not a huge savings, but every penny at this point counts. I mean, yeah.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion as written.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, Sherry.
Roll call votes. Commissioner?
Aye.
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 Motion carries.
The next action item, the Constables Education and Training Board will seek regulatory change to no longer provide constables and deputy constables training ammunition. This was another one of those individual cost savings initiatives that the board approved at the May meeting. I'll just go through the act and the regulations in relation to this. Title 37, Section 431.43, Firearm and Ammunition. Subsection A, as a prerequisite for attending a firearms qualification course, a constable shall provide at all times during the course a firearm and ammunition, magazines, speed loaders, safety accessories, and cleaning equipment specific to the firearm. The board will provide ammunition to the constable for use during instruction. The constable shall provide ammunition for use during the qualification course. And then just to reiterate back to Section 7148, the use of firearms, the Constables Education and Training Board, with the review and approval of the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, shall establish standards for the certification or qualification of constables and deputy constables to carry or use firearms in the performance of their duties. Title 37, Section 431.41, the qualification course. Subsection B, after a constable attains initial firearms qualification, the constable shall complete the board's annual firearms qualification course to maintain firearms qualification. Act 49 is silent on firearms training and or instruction. It only mentions standards for certification or qualification. The staff recommendation is the board would no longer provide training ammunition for 2019 and beyond, based upon what the regulations and the act state in relation to qualification.
Bottom line, the 4-hour show and shoot is if constables showing up, get their weapons inspected, safety process, etc., and then run through the qualification course. They're providing that ammo. That's no different than what they do now.
What is current?
The difference is if we're not providing training, we're not running them through 16 hours of drills, etc., we're not providing any training ammunition.
And for 2019, what's our expected savings by taking out the training ammo?
We're expending about $95,000 on training ammunition every year.
Trying to keep a running tally on where we're at money-wise, because the sense I got back from the executive director was that we've got to get down to that 1517 number. Correct. For a total cost of training, and right now we're 2223.
And for the August meeting, based on whatever actions occur today, we'll have an updated, cost estimates of, okay, the board took these actions, that this is going to save us this, or whatever the impacts of these are. And we'll keep that throughout the next year or two. We'll keep reporting to the board. This is what we started out with when all this started, and see how well our estimates were doing as far as savings or what things cost us. So we'll keep reporting that. But we need a determination on some of these things.
And that's where this is where we're fluid on what our numbers are, what the drop dead date is as far as when we're out of money. We're projecting still mid-June next year, correct?
2019, correct.
2019. So that's sort of where we're at. It's a fluid number. It really is that we're at the mercy of the surcharge money that's rolling in, where it's at in the pipeline versus our expenditures going out. and the size of our classes, I mean, that all is impacting on bottom line number, what that drop dead date is, and whether we can scrape through 2019. And that's basically where we're at right now in the short term. Okay. Do I have a motion to the board no longer provide training ammunition for 2019 and beyond?
Mr. Chairman, I don't like the and beyond.
And I think that wording was specifically put in there so that if the show and shoot went more than 2019, if it takes till 2020 to get this all accomplished, I think we just didn't want to lock ourselves into a specific date.
If you strike that, and during 2019, you have to.
We can revisit it again
You can
next year.
revisit it again.
So you want to refashion it? That's fine.
Okay. I'll make the recommendation that the board will no longer provide training ammunition for the calendar year 2019.
I just want to interrupt and say that we need to be careful that the language include the words that the board will seek regulatory change to that effect. The board doesn't actually have the power to do that. It has to seek regulatory change to make that happen. The way it's stated under the action item number 4 is the safest language.
So, Madam Solicitor, what is your recommended motion that we make?
The Constables Education and Training Board will seek regulatory change to no longer provide constables and deputy constables training and ammunition.
For the calendar year 2019.
Calendar year 2019.
Okay.
Can I make a clarification on that? I think we should be saying qualification ammunition, not training.
Well, that's all we've ever provided. The constable has to show up with their 60 rounds for qualification.
Yeah, and it says the board will provide ammunition to the constable for use during instruction. Do we want to say
the regulation
instructional
says we give them instructional
I'm saying
ammunition.
we're not doing any instruction.
Right. So we just kind of want to make it clear that in 2019, if we're not doing any training instruction, we want to be clear that they're still providing their qualification ammunition.
Okay, so they were providing their qualification ammo
The whole time,
Anyway,
for the whole 20
yes.
years.
Yes. Yes.
The one thing I want to clarify, though, as we look at this, the underlined sentence in the regulation is what we're looking to have stricken from the regulation. That wouldn't then preclude the board in the future from providing training ammunition, but it would then be a policy decision as to whether you're providing or not providing training ammunition. Right now, by regulation, if we're doing the training, the board is required to pay for the ammunition from now until whenever. So I don't know that we can make the regulatory change to say effective through only 2019. The discussion here is we remove this from regulation, and that gives the board the power through policy to decide whether or not it's appropriate to reimburse for training ammunition in the future. As of now, if we're doing training, it's a requirement under regulation.
So specific for 2019 for the short term, what do you think is adequate for language to get this done?
Well, for 2019, if we would do a basic training, the board would be required to pay for training ammunition. You cannot override the regulation based on my understanding.
For basic firearms.
Basic firearms.
Yeah. So basically, we're looking at just the annual pool.
Right, if they're just showing up, again, no training. They get their weapons inspected, get a safety brief, go cold into the qual course. That's their ammunition.
Yeah, because the motion died to eliminate basic training next year. So basic training, as far as I'm concerned, is still going. If that's true, then yeah, we still are, by reg, we're still providing that ammunition for it.
Correct.
So I guess we need to make that motion clear that this is for the annual 12. This is beyond the basic. The annual 12, they're coming back to shoot, not their first time through. Because right now, basic training is still in place for next year, and that motion died, to eliminate it. Since that basic training is, on for next year, we're still going to provide the ammunition for that training for that.
For the 40 hour.
Yeah, and they're still going to provide their own qual ammo at the end of that course. Now, moving to the other side of this, the folks that are coming back just for their annual recertification or requalification, they're providing their duty ammunition as they've always done before.
Right. And this doesn't apply.
Correct.
This is really speaking more towards the long term of the program at this point.
Correct. So short term for next year, what I need is a motion that says that seeking regulatory change for next year, for 2019, that we have ammunition be provided by the constables for qualification only.
Now, this is, let me put this out.
Okay.
The board will seek regulatory change to no longer provide annual instructional ammunition for 2019 only.
Madam Solicitor, how's that
Does
sound?
that sound good, Deborah?
I'm not sure I'm getting you.
We will not be through the ERC process by the end of 2019.
So would we need to put a policy in place then, in the interim?
We can't override regulation with policy.
The point of this action item was just to delete that underlying sentence from the regs. Well, whether it's long-term or short-term could be addressed in policy once the sentence is out of the regulations. If this requirement is gone from the regulations, then the policy could come in and sort of fashion this in different ways. If language about the year and the time frame is not in the regs, that's not, I'm just saying, how do we fashion the motion to strike this sentence? I think this sentence at the top actually does that.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I know it's not public comment, but I may be able to save the board a lot of headache here. Because you passed option 1, that eliminates the need for this action. So why are we discussing it? It's a dead issue. Just as a point of order, if I may.
Because action item 2, no action was taken on it, there is the potential for having one or more basic training classes, firearms training class next year, which then the board would be responsible for paying for firearm ammunition, which is what this action is about.
Right, but you already said that they had to anyways. It was under the regulatory requirement that they had to, correct?
Right. The question is, long term, is that the direction of the board? Does the board want this stricken from the regs so that the board has
I
the
thought we were
decision?
talking short term. I'm out.
Right. So does the board want the discretion for the future to make a decision year by year whether or not to provide training ammunition? As long as this regulatory language stays as is, the board does not have that option. If the board wants that option to be able to suspend for a year, providing training ammunition, then this statement has to come out of regulation. And so that's what I think that's what Chief Counsel is trying to point to, that if the motion is that first sentence, which means we're going to remove the underlying sentence in the reg, that's what the board is really considering. So and that provides the board the option year to year, once that happens, to be able to provide or not provide training ammunition.
Now, I do remember, and not to muddy the waters, under the long-term course of actions, the work group had decided that they wanted the basic firearms to remain intact.
Yes.
So that's another point that would sort of, and with that motion being denied for the basic training and the basic firearms.
That's still on. Yeah, it's still on for next year.
Mm-hmm.
So as it stands right now, how do I accomplish getting $95,000 out of our budget for next year? That's what I'm looking for. What motion do we need to have, or how does the motion need to be worded in order to accomplish what we need to do, which is take the training ammo out of the annual?
Right. I would say go with the initial sentence of seeking regulatory change, because that's the long-term fix. Because we're not going to be able to do regulatory change till probably to begin that process till 2020 or late. Because if we add online training, I mean, there's going to be a lot of regulatory change in how we do business. So de facto, if we're not providing annual training, we're not providing that annual. So whatever the cost, for basic 40-hour basic firearms, we run 1 or 2 next year, that will incur that cost. But off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what that would run us. I mean, it's going to be significantly less than $95,000 because we run about 54 annual and advanced firearms classes a year. So if we drop it down to 2 and we provide 500 rounds, that's what we budget for. Doesn't mean they hit 500 rounds in that basic, depending on the skill set and learning and all that. But so it's going to be significant reduction because we're not providing it to those 54 annual classes.
Councilor Brown, you had a motion on the floor. Where do you want to go with that? You want to withdraw that?
Yeah, I want to withdraw that motion.
Withdraw that motion. Second. Withdrawn. Okay. So to refashion that, we're seeking regulatory change to eliminate the sentence that the board will provide ammunition to the constable for use during instruction. That's suitable? That's my motion. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Further questions?
Constable Pites, roll call vote, please.
Aye.
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 All in favor? We will move on to action item number 5, which is going to be to reduce continuing education from 20 hours to 8 hours for the training year 2019. The board will again revisit this issue during 2019 board meetings for the 2020 training delivery. The 2 2019 topics will be 4 hours of social media and 4 hours of self-help / buddy aid. In the Act and the Regulations, Title 44, Section 7146, Continuing Education, the board, with the review and approval of the commission, shall establish a mandatory continuing education program for constables and deputy constables, which shall include no more than 40 hours per year concerning subjects the board may deem necessary and appropriate for the continued education and training of constables and deputy constables. In the Regulations, Title 37, Section 431.32 Requirements, subsection A constable shall attain the following to complete continuing education. Subsection 1, attend the hours of continuing education per year as determined annually by the board and published in a board training bulletin. The staff recommendation is the board reduces continuing education training for training year 2019 to 8 hours.
If I can one of the things that came out of the work group was trying to move continuing education, some or a large portion of training, to online. The staff, we've seen 3 entities who have created or have LMS systems who provide online training to similar entities. We've asked them for some basic cost estimates. We've received one where the other 2 aren't due to us till the 23rd. So by August, we'll have a lot more information for the board regarding online training and how we can implement that and what costs might be associated, et cetera. So, and the board can, as we've discussed with online training, if we end up going 8 hours for 1 year and we can get some online training in place by 2020, we can slowly build back up as the board feels appropriate, whatever the level of training should be through online, or if we still have to retain a classroom to do skills topics, laser shot judgmental, or review of, mechanics of arrest, whatever the board recommends. So we're going to drop down to 8 hours. It's the first time since the program started, it's always been 20 hours. The Act allows up to 40 hours of continuing education, but the board has never gone beyond the 20 because of the firearms requirement was 20, and, just these guys' status, the board always felt, 20 was sufficient. So,
I guess first thing, Madam Solicitor, that staff recommendation, board reduces continuing education training for training year 2019 8 hours. Does that pass muster with you?
It does. Again, with respect to, just breaking it out, not to be too long-winded, but to break it out into 2, whether or not that is adequate from a subject matter expert position, I can't speak on that, because if there was some kind of action, the board would hire an expert to say that is absolutely sufficient time, for someone to have continuing education. The other side would say the opposite. But from my standpoint, from a legal standpoint, the law does not require a certain minimum. It just says the annual for the continuing education, and to reduce it from the 20 hours to the 8 hours is within the regulation as well.
Question.
Board discussion, yes.
Just a question to follow up. Just out of curiosity, did the working group make the recommendations for the social media and self-aid, buddy aid training? Is that where that came from?
No, we already had Con Ed subjects in the pipeline that we've basically already paid for to be developed for 2019. Because typically we would have had, 4 topics. And so these are the ones staff's recommending. They've been written and done and are ready to go.
Okay, that could change though year to year, could it not?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
And as it always has.
Well, would it be advisable just to say reduce the training to 8 hours and let that training then be decided rather than specify in an agreement what that training is? I mean, does it have to say exactly this?
No, and basically what our recommendation is just to reduce the Con Ed training to the 8 hours, and not being specific on subject.
Because it could change, and we want to hear what the recommendations would be. When you have 8 hours, what's the best 8 hours of training that could be devised? So what is the best?
The buddy aid over the years, General, was based off of, we had a lot of evals over the years that, talk about first aid or whatever. And of course, the Stop the Bleed program is something that's going on across the country right now with tourniquets and pressure. And that's something that, I think it was just, as John said, it was in the pipeline. As the subjects are developed, this is what several years out for you guys to put in the pipeline.
So these were two topics that were essentially done at this point.
At this point in time.
That we
I
paid for.
understand. I understand. I'm not debating the selection at this point. I'm just wondering if we need it in there so we have some flexibility to make that adjustment each time we move forward with something. That's all.
Okay.
I have a question. So, is this outside of like first aid, CPR, or whatever, or is that part of this continuing ed? Like, is this mandatory in service or
Right.
Just,
These would be two mandatory.
There would be two
courses.
mandatory subjects for the 2019.
Do they do first aid, CPR every so often?
The board has never incorporated that because they were readily available when the program first started. We were really crushed for what topics to include, whether basic or con ed. And since those are readily available through fire companies, ambulance companies, the board's never offered, the basic first aid, CPR, or AED stuff.
Are they required to get that on their own?
There's no requirement. No.
Now, as independent contractors, what additional training they seek on their own. That's on them. So, I think Stop the Bleed. That's one of those programs that's out there that's being pushed pretty hard right now.
Yeah, we're doing that.
And that's actually part of this course. There's stuff. The Stop the Bleed is in this course.
Yeah, and that's beneficial. I don't know how beneficial the social media thing would be, but I've got no problem with the 8 hours. That's all we do is mandatory in services, 8 hours of training. So I think that's appropriate. It's just, I guess, I'm you kind of on the flexibility of, hey, is social media the best other thing if we're taking it from 20 to 8? But if we're just voting on the reduction of 8 hours, I'm okay with that.
You make a motion to that effect?
I did.
I would second that.
Second, General. Further discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Reddick?
Aye.
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 All in favor? Motion passed. Okay, the next item on the agenda is actually timely, talking about the 2019 8-hour continuing education subjects. I'm assuming that you all read this, so I'm not going to go into the whole details, but what we provided here are the proposed Con Ed subjects for 2019 training year. The first, which would be social media. This module is designed to present students with an overview of the ways that social media impacts and affects constables. This course will provide students with an overview of social media, show examples of several social media platforms and service providers, demonstrate how social media can aid constables in doing their jobs, and provide practical and important knowledge to constables on how to maximize their safety and security when using social media. This would be a 4-hour block of instruction. It would include our normal PowerPoint presentations, e-learning tutorials, videos, and that type of thing. We will have a student workbook that will be created as well. We provided the course outline for the 4 hours of instruction. And the main objections of this course would be to define social media and its uses, understand how social media can be used by constables as a job aid in their jobs, be aware of a working knowledge of different social media platforms, to understand the importance of social media policies for constables, demonstrate how social media can be effectively utilized as a communication tool for constables, recognize the risks of inappropriate social media use and the potential benefits of appropriate social media use by constables, understanding the risks to constables and their families that may come from social media use, and then to demonstrate knowledge regarding personal and operational security while using social media. The second 4-hour block of instruction would be the self-aid/buddy aid. This 4-hour course would provide constables with the knowledge, skill set, and tools necessary to survive or save a fellow constable's life due to a severe blood loss. This course includes information provided by the Stop the Bleed initiative at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in partnership with the Copeland Regional Trauma Council. This 4-hour instructional block would also include, the lecture, class discussion, skills practice. We would get into the treatment of stopping the bleed. They would do practical exercises, that type of thing. Upon completion of the course, the constable would be able to define the terms self-aid and buddy aid. They would be able to describe the development of a first aid kit, and then demonstrate the performance of the following skills: wound packing and direct pressure, tourniquet application, application of hemorrhaging agents, basic treatment of shock. The staff is recommending that the board approve these 2 4-hour modules for the training delivery of continuing education subjects for the 2019 training year.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you say these things are already done. Were we preparing for 20 hours? Like,
Yes,
Right,
yes,
originally-
we've already had the 20 hours has already been prepared, most of it. These 2 were the most that were completed the most.
They were furthest along in the
Furthest
development
along, yeah.
process.
Okay.
And that was another, to save costs, the other 2 modules, we were at the point of, let's stop working on those. These are almost done. I mean, they were probably 90% of the way when the work groups were meeting. It's just a matter of, we paid for them.
All right, so it would cost us additional money to get a subject other than the social media if we changed it. Do you know about what that cost is?
I can tell you what we average per curriculum hour. Hold on. So right now, and this is under, because these were developed under the old, developing 20 hours for Con Ed here. At that point, we were costing about $5,700 per hour, the development costs. So, right. So, and in part of our cost savings, when we're looking at it, is if we're dropping down, these 2 courses are basically paid for. So we're not developing any more 20-hour curriculum or additional firearms curriculum for 2019. So that's rolling into some of the cost savings that the board's looking at recouping to try and get online training up and those things.
The social media thing, I'll be honest with you, being an older constable, I'm not real hep on, the computer technology thing. But I'll be honest with you, once I learned to use Facebook and Twitter and all these things, I found so much information out there tracking folks down that it has been a real benefit. And for me, yeah, I would love to see this class go, because I really think it provides a valuable resource for the constables to, because a lot of their information they have to track down their own. Without JNet, without all these other things, this has sort of been, our go-to thing as far as tracking folks down. So it's been beneficial. I have no problem with social media work. And the self-aid, buddy aid, I'm going to be honest with you, that also incorporates in, if you get into a situation where you're actively being shot at and people are getting shot, that if you're moving to different, you talk about the hot zone, the warm zone, the cold zone.
I'm all for that.
I think it's
a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I think these 2 are pretty relevant. I think, as far as improving these going forward, for next year, I think is probably 2 good courses to, be able to put through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a constable, so I'll certainly defer to your judgment on that. But the process moving forward, and I know this is maybe getting outside of the action item, how is it determined, like, what you pick? Like, is that presented out to the membership to say, hey, here's a list of topics?
We have done, through Con Ed, we have done surveys. We've sent out independent surveys. We look at the evals that they do on every class. We look at what have we taught in the last 5-6 years, because certain topics, use of force or whatever, we try to recycle certain ones back because they're important enough that people need refreshing on them. So it's a combination of those things.
Okay.
And we usually start out with 6 or 8 topic ideas, and then they get paired out, because honestly, sometimes with this training population, and this is no slight against you guys, certain things, it's not enough clarity for us to teach that maybe a municipal police officer or trooper, that's clearly a subject for them, but these guys tend to be in these gray areas in some of these places, so there's not enough there for it to be beneficial or educational for them.
Yeah, okay.
Do I have a motion to approve these two subjects for next year's training?
I have a question.
Question, go ahead.
Would it be appropriate at this time to see what, I know we have a small group out there, but what they think?
Yeah.
Social media.
We already own Laser Shot, and we're taking out all of the pre-requirements for training beforehand this next year, possibly with a show and shoot. So rather than do Facebook, which I would think most of the people in this room know how to use Facebook, why not take the equipment we already own, simply set it up in a room, and for 4 hours allow the constables to do the shoot-no-shoot drills that we used to do at the annual Reed firearm certification. Which I would think that would be more important for training than, again, to necessarily know. Not that we couldn't do the Facebook in the future, you've already paid for that training, you can shelve it somewhere and then pull it back out again, but in my opinion, a life and death scenario would be more important than Facebook.
Who would do the training? Who would do the training?
We have instructors, our firearms guys. Normally that it's part of that 20 hours in firearms. They do the judgmental shooting, so.
And that was a recommendation for the work group, that they wanted to under the long-term courses of action, to see a defensive tactics and laser shot 8-hour skills day. So that is something, and again, we're trying to take things that have already been developed so that we don't have to incur more curriculum development expenses. We would have to, I know that we have a lot of the laser shot scenarios already there, but we would still have to come up with a new instructor guide, those types of things for the laser shot.
And just the other one is additional instructors too.
Yes.
One of the things we looked at
Because the student
is
instructor
if we
ratios.
have subjects that take one instructor versus, and even if it's only 2 or 3, if I'm running you guys because you're running through a laser shot scenario, I got 24 other guys or 20 guys in the class. I need to not waste their time. I need to, make the most of that time. And so, and I'm not opposed to it, Dan. I'm just saying that's some of the things we looked at. There's a lot of bad, options here for a year or so.
There is. I just think in this day and age with how publicized the media is on officer-involved shootings and stuff like that, if the next year I get involved in a shooting and the local news media finds out that my shoot-no-shoot training that year has been taken out, it might not look too great.
Well, and this was a concern the executive director asked me, and I said, the way things are now, as a constable, I can take my firearms in February, and then the following year I don't take it till October.
Right.
So I still have a year or more in between my judgmental training.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily always going to be on that 12-month cycle, even the way we currently do training. So, and as Sherry said, that's the intent, is bring that back in some kind of skills day.
And I totally get the sitting around time in class because we've all been there as constables in the classroom, but even just watching another constable perform shoot-no-shoot drills is a pretty effective way to learn because that really brings in the opinion of, oh wow, look how that guy handled it versus how the other guy handled it. So anyway, that's just one of the
Rich.
Yeah, one of the things I brought up in the work group too was looking for outside resources, and one of them that I think you guys kind of reinvented the wheel by redoing this class. FLETC already offers a TACMed. They'll come out and they provide tourniquets. They're more than willing to come out and help local agencies. I spoke with the membership because I went through a couple courses that they offered. They said they'd be willing to come out here and help PCCD. So can PCCD reach out to agencies like FLETC that have training programs already established? We'll come out with their resources with the funding provided by the federal government, and then they also provide the constables and the participants of that class with tourniquets. We got 2 tourniquets, $30 to pick in the med bag.
And I can tell you this, I've been down that road with both programs. In fact, we tried to get an update for deputy sheriff. They learned, they have EVOC training. So we tried to get FLETC's EVOC program because it's developed, it's the latest, and it went all the way up the food chain and was shot down because the way we run our academy, we don't have current sworn officers teaching the course. 90% of our instructors at the academy are retired guys or current, depends on the subject and their availability. So I can't guarantee every time we teach EVOC it's a current officer, a certified. Sometimes I get the guy who just retired last year, but he's been teaching EVOC and has been through the FLETC course. They wouldn't give it to us unless we could testify that every time it's taught.
Courses have different standards that
Right.
you need to go in, and the TACMed isn't one of those that required that. So, I mean, if you got to pick and choose, but that was a readily available course. And as for the Facebook thing, I mean, most constables, I'd like to assume that's their JNet.
Right.
So,
and let me ask you this.
I would sooner see constables getting a first aid CPR class in that 8-hour block of instruction, because we're carrying around defendants to and from courts, jails, and who knows what medical conditions that they have that we don't know about, what drugs they took 10 minutes ago. That is something that I think we should have from the PCCD as a standard thing. I know it's readily available elsewhere, but the PCCD is certifying us to go pick up people and take them places with court, you know. I just think it's smart that we have that as part of our basic training through the PCCD. And if you are sending us saying, okay, it's readily available somewhere else, when you do get them, I think PCCD ought to be keeping the records of our training on file that we get somewhere else, like the OCAT, baton. If we get it somewhere else, if we give you the certification, we keep it on file. You don't do that right now with TASER. I think you ought to. I don't see why that's such a hard thing for the PCCD to if we send you our certification that we get somewhere else, why not scan in the system and put it as part of our training record?
Well, let me do this,
Rich.
Rich.
From someone that if they're certified to train us and they provided certification for that, why can't the PCCD keep that on file?
Well, let me do this, Rich. I've met a solicitor to look into that to see if legally we can do that, if that can be, those training documents can be incorporated into our system.
Well,
and we'll get back to you at the next meeting on
Well,
that.
just the one thing that I would like to point out is it has no bearing on your certification with us, though.
Right.
So, I mean, for us to keep, we basically be keeping track of all your personal documents for you.
At a cost that's going to be billed in the account.
That would cover you under litigation to show that, yes, the individual constable is certified, and here's the proof of it. Well, that's all we're doing is asking you to track the proof, not certify us on it. You're just saying, yes, they are certified, so if litigation comes up, hey, here's the stuff. He did have it on file, he was certified.
And what was your name, sir?
I'm Constable Reynolds.
What county?
Reynolds, North Ireland.
Thank you.
Just a point, listening to all this, I looked closely at each of the course outlines that are here. When you have a course that predominantly could be done online, I don't know why that wouldn't be an online prescriptive course. And I agree that social media has become a big issue, particularly in law enforcement too, because I know in our community we're learning a lot about what people are telling each other behind the scenes, and that's important. But all that can be done online. Now, the one you were talking about on the watching other people perform in a
laser probe,
right? That's different. So maybe what we need to do is look at optional opportunities for training online that could be incorporated into their portfolio, but make that available and not necessarily a required kind of Con Ed kind of program of the 8 hours. Just an idea that I'm suggesting, because I think if we give more flexibility and actually increase the opportunity for learning, if people enjoy the online experience, why not? So.
Do we want to revisit this issue in the August meeting? Can we do that? Where are we at for time? Where are we at for time as far as scheduling for next year?
If we're not developing or creating new training, and the only reason I say that is because right now we have everything from, getting a canned course to doing something else. That's the key, is we start running out of time come fall. So, because the key will be instructors. So if we change out to this subject, what instructors do the schools need to have available in the schedule? So that's probably the biggest key, is making sure that whatever the board selects, the schools can react and make sure they got the instructors available too. Because the board has to have, they have to use certified instructors to cover those topics, whatever it is.
Well, I think we're all in agreement with the fact that the self-aid buddy aid is a viable option. And I mean, obviously we haven't put it to a vote yet, but I'm of the opinion that I think that's good training. Certainly we're using Stop the Bleed and getting all the troopers trained. So I think that's important. That's saved troopers' life last year that he was able to put a tourniquet on himself. So for me, that's a no-brainer. I think that's always going to be relative, no matter how many times you give it. So do we want to break them up, or?
Constable Place, yeah.
I have several comments. First of all, with social media, I think this is a real tool for a constable. I really do. They've had a lot of success down around the Pittsburgh area with the police departments using social media, and it's really working. Next, self-aid or buddy aid. As mentioned, we transport prisoners to and from the jail, and it's known that there are drugs in the jail. Okay, and when you go out and even you make an arrest, somebody might have just taken some drugs. I believe if we get into this self-aid, buddy aid, maybe include the use of Narcan, how to use it, and then again with first aid, ACCA, Allegheny County Constables, the association provides first aid training at the cost of the association, not to the members. So that is available.
Well, there's one other component on the social media side, and that's the liability side, because we have officers that have been getting jammed up for inappropriate use of social media. And I think that as an important part of the social media, not just learn, because as was said, a lot of folks know how to use Facebook, they know how to use social media. But the other side of the coin, using it and using it appropriately versus inappropriately, and avoiding lawsuits or liability for things that you may put out there, because I know that I've seen that already with departments across the state. I'm sure DSP, same thing, right? You've got troopers and you've got folks that put stuff out that has become a real problem that had to be resolved. And education beforehand would have precluded a lot of that stuff from happening, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you have to necessarily worry about the topics. I mean, not everybody gets use of force scenarios every year. I just think that it's important that it needs to be rotated. So, maybe we say, hey, every other year you're going to have some use of force component in your mandatory in-service training or continuing education, whatever you call it. Like, I think that has to happen. We're recertified on our ASP and MACE and those type of things, either by, standard under ASP or our CALIA standards, that certain things have to repeat themselves every couple of years because we think that they're relevant. I don't know what you've done last year. I don't know what you plan on doing, the next year. I just think there needs to be a kind of a defined, educated way on how we're going to conduct the training. And like I said, I don't know what you guys did last year or 2 years ago.
And one of the topics that we've cycled back every couple of years, and probably I hear the most bitching and complaining about, as you brought up about transporting prisoners, is infectious disease and the issues that are all around prisoners, and hepatitis and everything else, and that we cycle that back. It's probably been 4 or 5 years, and every time we do, I hear nothing but endless, we don't need this. But if you're transporting prisoners, that's all the stuff you need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the most interesting topic, but it's also information.
Well, you're never going to get everybody to agree on a training topic.
And,
I mean, when you have a group this large or as large as my agency, you're not going to get everybody to agree. There's some people that are going to be extremely proficient in social media and say, hey, this is waste. And then you're going to get some people that say, hey, this is the best course I ever took. I now know how to, navigate this in order to benefit my position as constable. I guess my only concern is we're taking it from 20 to 8. We need to make those 8 count.
Sure. Well, what's the board's pleasure?
I just have one more, just quick question. The social media and the Stop the Bleed, we've pretty much got those.
Yeah, they're essentially done.
Okay, so we'll save money if we implement those two.
Right. And somebody made the comment, we have, just like when we do use of force or affect some of those ones we cycle, we don't have to invest that much money because not a lot changes. We just need to make some things are updated or whatever.
And currently, that's our concern is to
right. This is a short term. Just find that money because, as the commissioner said, our end goal is online training and those topics that are available.
Okay. So I would make the motion to adopt the social media and the Stop the Bleed for the calendar year 2019.
I'll second that.
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote, starting with Constable Pikes, please?
Aye.
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 Aye. With discussion.
Okay, Gerald.
All in favor? Okay. So we're through the action items. The next item on the agenda is a discussion item regarding the firearm certification program comparisons. We did talk briefly about this when we were going through the short-term courses of action. Any input, comments, questions from the board members on this comparison chart?
Sherry, if I just wanted to say to the board, we just wanted to get this to you and have as an informational item, because I think going forward, as we continue to talk about what firearms will end up long-term, this is going to be something that'll come up again. Do we accept waivers, et cetera? So this is more for you to hold on to, because as we have future discussions, we readily have that information at hand.
I'd like to ask the major. So I look at PSP and I look at the extensive program you run for firearms. Do you have financial struggles in order to get that accomplished?
No.
Because it looks like a fairly big dollar situation, just getting your folks through their initial training, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's one of the 5 units that we have, and I don't want to say they all have equal amount of hours, but we take our firearms very seriously. And much like these folks, you're on your own. It's very rare that you're going to have backup readily available. So, and I'm not saying we don't always have budget stuff, but that's not something we're willing to compromise on.
Right. Because my gut reaction is looking at all the different programs out there. A lot of it, I think, is based on what the affordability is to the program. I mean, I really do. I don't think anybody would not want to drive the Cadillac versus the VW. But the fact of the matter is, what can you afford to pay for? Because when I'm looking at these different programs and what they require and how much ammunition they use and the hours of training and all that, it sort of looks to me like it's more budget-based than it really is policy-based. And that's why I say probably why the Commonwealth hasn't adopted one standard training program across the state, because of all the different funding issues with all the different agencies. I got to think that's.
I mean, I can tell you, probation and parole county, they're similar to deputy sheriffs and constables in the sense that there's a surcharge that's collected that goes into that firearms training program, and that's how they pay for that. Right. They've been actually around about the same length of time as constables. I think that act was passed 94 or 95. But I know money's getting tight for them, because just like constables, their surcharge hasn't been increased. And over the years, they've found there are probably places where it should be assessed and it's not, et cetera. So they have some very similar issues. But pretty much everybody else, Act 120 and 235, of course, that cost is passed on to the person taking the course. Those are paid for courses. Game Commission, Fish and Boat, they acquire theirs through obvious, various fees and stuff. Fishing license and hunting license and that kind of stuff. But they also have a much smaller training population. The Game Commission, they only run a basic class when they are going to be facing a lot of vacancies. I mean, they have very small full-time officers. I think it's less than 200, I know that. So they may now run a basic for 2 years, because they don't have the vacancies. So
just for clarification on ours, when a cadet class is funded, they know how much it's going to cost. We know how many cadets we're going to start with. All those costs are incorporated in. So if there's not money for a cadet class, then there is no firearms training for that particular segment going through. But to get a little bit more in depth, we wanted to increase the qualification for the members currently out in the field, so their annual research. And for us, we want to do more, but the department also says, hey, you got a kind of a budget for this, and if we increase the one round in our qualification course, you need to multiply that by 4,500. You know, so if we go to 10 rounds, multiply that by 4,500. You go to 20 rounds, you know. So we're not doing the things that at least my firearms unit would like to do out in the field because of budgetary concerns. And when you buy the ammo in quantities that we buy it in, it's actually not that easy to get. You know, yeah, you can go down to a store and buy 100 rounds of whatever you want, but when you're trying to buy 45,000 rounds or 450,000 rounds, it takes a while to get in. So we also have that limitation. That.
But you hit on the very first part of it was, you know how many people you're training.
All right.
Whereas we don't. Our program fluctuates every year. You know, a lot of people come and go on, and so that budgeting struggle that goes on will continue as long as as long as it is current. But
just a comment from a county perspective. When I look, in fact, I want to thank whoever put these charts together. They're very well done, actually. There's a unique cultural difference that all these agencies and officers have to deal with. Certainly, we don't want to get into PSP's turf because it's a unique turf, no doubt about it. But I'm wondering if there is some way, if you look at county government, you know, we work pretty closely with constables, sheriffs, obviously, and our county probation office. Those three are pretty tight, actually, in terms of their oversight. Yet, if you look at their training for firearms, it's uniquely different. And if we could tie those a little bit tighter, maybe we could find a way to save money by having the opportunity to cross-ventilate those programs so that we can all, maybe save some dollars in the long run. So I think it's worthy of looking at. I'm not saying it'll ever get done, but it won't get done if you don't look at it. That's the way I am. But anyway, that would be a recommendation, at least those three to consider for this.
I think ultimately this exercise was to look at going forward the waiver, what would be acceptable for waiver. So, that information's got time to digest that and figure out going forward what we want to do. Is this something we're going to revisit in August?
Well, that's what I mean. As the conversations have come up about, as we go through and the board revisited show and shoot in 2019, I'm sure the discussion of will the board accept waivers, of training. Even if you reduce the number of guys coming to firearms class by, or qualification by 5%, 10%, there are some savings there. But again, as we've discussed, the Commonwealth's all over the map on firearms standards. So I think at appropriate times we're going to revisit this.
And you're planning going forward, our next big election cycle would be
2020. Well, I think it's 2020. Then they would hit us 2021.
2021, yes.
Yes. Like we would see the results of that November election in 2021.
2019 municipal.
2019.
Right, but on the cycle.
And then we start training in 2020.
On the cycle we've seen, as far as training, it's 2021 will hit us with the next.
And you see the wide swing that we've had in the numbers. I mean, 300 some versus 90. I mean, when you try to crunch this thing out and you try to project going forward where you're at for a number of new people coming into the program, getting reelected or elected, that's it really is a crapshoot sometimes trying to figure out going forward how many people you're going to have actually show up this year. And in trying to get that information, I think you've actually gone to the point where you've called the counties to try to get an idea as to how many were getting elected, correct? Did you guys do that or not?
Well, we're able to do that in the system with the terms of office currently in there and when they're ending. So I can
we can look at
term endings.
Right, who's ending. The key is, I don't know if you're getting reelected or not. Then but if somebody come in and fills your shoes, then we got the whole basic training, basic firearms, versus you're just going to go to Con Ed and firearms.
And Craig, right now we probably have over 100 constables and deputy constables in our system with valid terms of office that have never gone to basic training.
A lot of those came out of that last election cycle.
2016 election.
They contacted us, they, registered with us, sent us their, election paperwork, and we haven't heard from them.
But every year we always have to try to account for them in some way, shape or form.
That's not It's really a fluid number. Okay. All right, any questions on this chart? I agree with the general. nicely done. Very informational.
Thank you, Deborah Williams, for helping us with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to the informational items. This was discussed at the last meeting. At the May 10th, 2018 meeting, the board requested the program staff look into monetary compensation for former board chair Fred Cantina to be deposed for a civil lawsuit. Chief Counsel Deborah Sanford provided an opinion, and basically she said that the board can grant the request that he made to them. She would not object to that, but she did ask that he would be required to provide proof to us that he lost money on the day of the deposition. Basically, staff wanted to bring this back to you because it was asked for an opinion to be made at the last board meeting. So we're bringing it forth just as an informational item to give you Chief Counsel's opinion on this. But now we have asked for Constable Cantina to provide us with verifiable information on his lost wages, travel expenses, the date of the deposition.
And once he provides that to us,
Then we'll bring it back to the board for approval as an action item then, to approve the specific amount of money that he would be requesting.
Do you anticipate that at August's meeting?
I'm sorry?
Do you anticipate that for August meeting?
Depending on when he gets
right,
it to
when
us,
he gets
it
us,
might
I sent Fred an email about 2 weeks ago, and he acknowledged it. I said, you're going to have to provide whatever documentation or to be presented to the board. And he said once he gets it, he would provide it. So it may not be till
It might not be till November.
Right. So,
But at least we wanted to update you on that request from Chief Counsel. John, do you want to talk about the board transition policy?
sure. On page 20, as I've already mentioned a couple of times, as the board goes through trying to transition the program, things that came out of the work for online training, et cetera, there's going to be eventually the board's going to have to change regulations. That's a very lengthy and long process. So in the interim, we're probably going to have to address things in what I will call a transitional policy, and this will go through legal counsel, et cetera, to try and cover some of the issues that will happen during this transitional period. Just talking about, it was discussed earlier, it's come up about, so if I go to a qualification and I fail and I shoot again and I fail, does my certification get turned off as of that day versus the way it always has been where based on my previous firearms training, it would continue. So as the board works through these things, we'll slowly start calling it into a transitional draft policy, and this has to go through, come to the board for input and review and legal review. It's one of these things we'll go through probably a couple of iterations, but we need to at least get some initial stuff out probably to cover 2019, and so staff has to sit down and go through the regulations and address it and get with Deborah on what do we need to address, because we don't want to submit for regulatory change until we're pretty confident, we've covered everything, because that's a 2-year process if nothing gets kicked back, if nothing is objected to, or, so it's a lengthy process. So we want to make sure we have a good solid change to the regulation before we submit it. But in that transitional year or year and a half or whatever, we need to have something that the constables can look at and understand this is what the training policy is and the schools, etc. So we'll start bringing you draft versions, and it'll be working draft, over the next couple of meetings, I'm sure.
So you're anticipating initial draft for August 9th meeting?
Right. We'll have, because there are already some things, that we can start putting in there. Doesn't mean we're going to ask you to act on it. We're going to ask you to review it, provide input. We'll go back through the legal review, etc. So,
Madam Solicitor, is that going to work for you, Tom West?
I think we'll try to make it work.
Right, because ultimately, if we want to have some kind of policy in place for January, ultimately it has to go to the commission. And so they have a meeting in September and typically beginning of December.
Second Wednesday in December.
So December's kind of our last mark. And we may bite this off in chunks. When the program started, that's exactly what the board did. They said, okay, these are the most important things we need to address immediately. They got that out, and then as we progressed, they will continue to revise it. So,
now, is this something that can be pieced out propose to the commission meeting by meeting?
Well, as the board, if let's say we, and I'm just going to pick on firearms as an example, if we, there's a couple things we need to address with the show and sheet, and we get that approved and it gets out and now in place in 2019, and then by 2019 we're looking at online training, and let's say we know we'll have it up in 2020. So now here are the issues associated with that. Then we would revise the policy, add it in, and would go to the commission. So as the board transitions the program, we would, and then once we got what I would call the 85-90% solution, or when legal counsel says, okay, we need to go ahead and submit for regulatory change, because that's a very lengthy process. Like I said, if everything goes well, it's still very lengthy.
Questions on the board?
Okay. And as John said, we'll keep updating the board at each of the meetings then with that as well. The next informational item is another working document that staff are going to keep updating as we go through this process. What we've created is an Excel spreadsheet showing the different courses of action, the actions that the board has taken, and what we need to do for the staff perspective of does this need to go to the board, does this need to go to the commission, those types of things. And then we've also provided with you a calendar with this, an updated calendar just showing when we anticipate the different things happening as far as going to, bringing stuff back to you, to the board, going forward to the commission meetings, when we'll get the training schedules out, when we have revised budgets coming in, all of those things moving forward that staff have to make sure that we are keeping tight control of those time frames.
And we'll keep updating these as things change. So as like we're developing that policy, we'll keep updating, okay, now we're targeting, it's been through everything, you guys have approved it, we're targeting it for the September commission meeting or December or whatever. So these will be changing documents, just more as trying to show we're trying to track these items, because we want to make sure we're doing these things in the right order and getting them done in time to implement the next phase.
And as you can see from the timeline too, we not only have the items in there in relation to the short-term courses of action that the board took action on today, but also we're trying to also, if you look on page 24 at the very bottom of the timeline, the lines 35 and 36, well there we're talking about that skills day that the work group came up with. So we're trying to determine that starting, in the first quarter of next year of 2019 to try to get that developed and in place so that we can have that published, ready to go by 2020.
Looks like a pretty ambitious schedule.
Any questions, comments from the board on the timeline? The last informational item is going to be the long-term courses of action, just an update basically on this. These were the items that the work group came up with during the meetings in March and April of this year. This is, and what the board had voted on was the long-term course of action, the course of action number 2, which was the training conversion. So we've taken that motion and the action that the board has taken, and we've sort of, pieced it all out too, just with a few updates. I believe John stated earlier, we did meet with 3 vendors who have already established learning management systems for online training. We are waiting back for cost estimates from them. So we're hopeful by the August 9th meeting, we'll be able to present the board with cost estimates for the online training from these vendors that we've met with. Basically, the only other update to this document for the long-term courses of action would be that eliminating of the optional training. That it made it not only in the short-term courses of action, but also in the long-term, because we felt that that is something that, and the work group felt that we need to eliminate that. And there is that cost savings of about $10,000 that we'll have each year for the optional training. Again, this will be a working document. We will bring this back to the board at each meeting so that we can keep you abreast of what's going on with all these other long-term training conversion courses of action.
And we did pass a motion, Council Place made about as a work group's meeting 1 year down the road.
Yes.
And that process going forward, because really, as fluid as this whole situation is, I think it's imperative that we do that. And I mean, it's going to have to be at least on an annual basis that we do that. If it needs to be before that, I'm more than happy to try to get it scheduled and get it done. Okay.
But definitely on an annual basis, I think that needs to happen.
Yeah, that needs to happen.
Yep. Any comments, questions, or concerns with the long-term course of action? Do we want to take this now? We have time.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes to 11. We've burnt through the agenda. So, public voice. Okay, limited to like 3 minutes, and I hope it's a different subject. And each time we're going to repeat the same thing. It's sort of like the last judge I was in front of. He said, I see council has 18 witnesses here. Is there anybody the 18 is going to tell me anything different than the first guy? If not, go ahead and leave. So, just that.
And just make sure you state your name too. For the record.
Yeah, we'll just go right down the line, guys, right down this way, okay?
Constable Daniel Horrible, Adams County, Pennsylvania. I know this is an extremely unpopular thing, but I'm blown away that I was there for the work group meetings and we didn't see this chart about constables trained, certified, not certified, how many actually work for the courts. And in my opinion, the most expensive thing that we have to face as CETB is to pay is the basic training and basic firearms. So we're paying for 328 people to become certified firearms or whatever, and only 2 are providing any kind of funds back to the courts again? There's no way we can address that situation through regulatory reform like we're talking about right now?
Well, we had talked about it in the work group, and that's where we had talked about tying it to finding the mechanism to tying it to, you work for the court somehow. And because that came up in the work group meeting. So, and we went all over the map. Doesn't mean I served one piece of paper or some kind of minimum or whatever. So that's still out there. I mean,
it's $800, right? Is it a basic, or no, $1,200 for a basic? It's a basic class.
15,000 per class.
Right, about 15,000 per class. Yeah.
I mean, that's
so,
huge.
Right.
Well, and then other side note, which is whatever we can discuss another time, is what's going to happen to the ammo that's on store? Because if I remember correctly, we had a bunch of ammo stored up.
Right. So what happens is if we go down the road and if the regulatory change happens and it says we're no longer providing training ammunition, once we're in the clear of that, then we'll surplus the ammo, and whatever money we get for that, will go back into the account. Of course, as soon as you buy ammo, it's like any car, you drive it off the lot, you're only going to get about half price. Deputy sheriffs, we had around a lot of 17,000 rounds from federal, 9mm, and in the first case, they had 4 squib rounds. So we stopped using that lot, and literally, 2 months after we bought it, we only got half price per round.
I have my credit card here.
Sell it.
Next.
All right, Constable Weiser, Adams County. Quick question. We're talking about training, and I don't know if it was ever brought up before, but there are 3 state associations, and there are a couple county associations that offer a lot of training. I'm currently in a right to know request with Chief Counsel about trying to get email addresses. My question is, in the interim, when our associations or the county associations have training announcements, we have small email lists. Can we forward them to someone on staff to blast those out for training? For example, like we have one with Stop the Bleed here at Holy Spirit Hospital. It's a free course that we partnered with them to offer. I have 100 and almost 200 members. It's a small piece of the pie out of 1,100. And I don't know how many email addresses you have, Sherry, but if our associations can forward the training announcements to you, that's a real simple, just click and forward out to everybody that's on our email list. I think that'd be a huge benefit. That's number one. Number 2 is the letter to legislature about the changes that was being drafted. I assume that that's still on hold until, okay. So when is that going to be done, do we think, before they reconvene? Because obviously that's an important part. Our organization's trying to get legislation passed to raise the fee. That letter would help. I was kind of hoping to have it before they broke for summer, but that didn't happen. Mr. Merwine, any idea of when that's?
We're still working through that process, and it's really dependent upon the actions the board and the commission take. We really need what we need to include in that letter is the actions that we're taking.
Sure.
So we can't really have such a letter.
And when's that meeting that they're going to vote on that?
I'm sorry?
When's the meeting they're going to vote on those changes?
Many of these changes, if they go through, will be in the September meeting.
September, okay. Thank you. And my last thing is, I just want to thank you for allowing the public comment before and in the middle. I felt like this time we finally could get a little more involved instead of being like caged animals and told, here, you fix this, but you can't talk. So I just want to thank you for that.
And I've seen a variety of formats over the years. Even how the commission runs theirs with public voice. I haven't seen it done like that before until I sat through one of their meetings. And
Typically, advisory committees do that. They'll do it right before the action item. So if you have any comment on the action item, you can comment at that point. It's not a discussion; it's a comment, and then the committee discusses it. Some do it at the beginning of all their action items. My one advisory committee, they got a list of the 5 action items, and then before they do the action items, any comments on the upcoming action items, people provide comment, and then the committee then talks through them as they go through.
Yeah. And that was one of the things with the work when that suggestion was made to us as well. Is that way the audience could get their opinions and out before the board was taking any action. So that's why that was changed. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, if you could you provide an answer to my question about the sending out the email training rosters? So we have a couple trainings coming up that'd be great.
Well, that was one of the comments that I wrote down. That's something I guess we would have to get legal opinion on if we would be able to basically solicit for your organization to put that information out to the constables. It may just be it goes out to every constable that I have an email address for, rather than just a specific area.
No, that's what we want.
Okay. Or if it was a possibility to actually have a section of our website page created with just a calendar calendar events or something like that.
I think if Chief Counsel approves it, the most effective way is to send it out in an email. Most people are going to do that. If they have to click to go somewhere else, we all know how that's going to go. So, but anyways, just my 2 cents. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
On down the line here.
Greg Smith, Franklin County. Just want to go back to some of the frustration. I know that Rich had expressed earlier. I kind of had that in the last meeting. I think that the process of watching the sausage being made is really frustrating. But I think the results out of this meeting are about the best we could possibly have expected, and I want to thank you all for your service.
Next. Ron.
Yeah, Ron Quinn, Center County PFOC. In the meeting here, you kind of cracked the door open already a little bit when we talked about people who were struggling for retraining and looking at other agencies, looking at other local producers and stuff like that for that training. Why can't we go further and look at acceptable accreditation from different agencies? For example, if somebody goes through an NRA law enforcement, not just NRA, but NRA law enforcement for a weapons qualification, why can't those accreditations transfer over? If somebody goes through some other law enforcement class and stuff that basically covers almost the same subject that we're going to be approaching in a training year, why can't that be accepted? And the other thing, just like Constable Reynolds was talking about too, as far as you guys are a training depository. Mostly you produce the training that then gets certified and recorded and deposited into records here. So everybody that knows constables and wants to see what they've actually been trained in, they're going to come to you guys first and stuff. So why not, if we are the ones that provide the material, provide the electronic files and stuff like that to show the certification, why can't the CETB or PCCB, whatever you want to call it, go ahead and deposit those records and stuff to show the extra certifications? Okay, I think there's a cost savings there as well, because if I go out and maybe I do spend more money than what you're going to spend on me to go get training somewhere else, but it's just as good training, if not better in a lot of cases. If I'm the one that's paying the money for it, why shouldn't you accept that certification? In which case, then you don't have to train me that year. That's extra money that's saved as well. And that could be for a number of things, not just firearms, but it could be for the first aid that we were talking about, for the baton and OC spray and tasers and things like that. These are all things that we all contemplated on as far as constable or optional type training, but yet we can go ahead and show these things and then again deposit those certifications. But that's why I say, if you're looking at it to crack the door open to help those people that need refreshers and need additional remedial training and stuff, why not do it also for the people who can go ahead and pass the course and show their certifications and save some money too?
Yeah, point taken. Yep. Okay, Rich. Now I'm going to keep moving. Methodical piece.
While you're looking at regulation, the change of regulation regarding training, whatever you have to do to possibly get some kind of a change to require a medical to take the physical portion, because nothing frustrates me more than the fact that for the past 8 years, I've had no hands-on training from Temple. They don't do it no more. They just don't do it no more. You don't go out on a mat and practice nothing. I think it's very bad. I think it's setting us up for failure. It's a perishable skill, the hands-on, and you have to try it. I think it should be part of the course, and if you can't do it, then you don't pass. If guys are not passing, it's for a good reason, and I don't mind if some guys fail. Just like handing out the questions, the answers to 10-question true and false, test just before you give it is ridiculous. It's not a serious program when you do that, and it frustrates me. I've taken plenty of online courses that were hard courses, 100-question true and false or multiple choice. You fail it, you fail it. If you fail this program, then hey, take some personal responsibility. But we shouldn't be letting guys go through and passing these courses and going out in the field ill-prepared for what they're going to encounter. I think a lot of the training that we receive, unfortunately, does do that. And I hope that can change over time.
Well, I have to agree. What's frustrating for me as a DT and a firearms instructor, I have people who wave out on the DT, but they show up the following weekend with their firearm. On DT weekend, they're carrying an oxygen generator with them. They can't participate, but they're there for firearms. And one of my disagreements is, if you can't defend your firearm, if you can't do the DT side, defend your firearm, then why are we out doing firearms? See what I'm saying? It all does tie together. Let's face it. So now you and I are on the same wavelength on that.
I hope that the board considers requesting that kind of regulatory change. I mean, even Act 235 requires an MMPI, physical. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's make our program more serious. Let's do it. We need it.
235 and 120 have those in statute. So the board has wrestled with this from the beginning of the program. In fact, it is in the regulations.
Things aren't always going to be easy, but let's try it.
I'm not opposed to it, Rich. I agree from a training philosophy. The biggest issue, and I know you guys hate that, is your status. It's because everybody else, if you look at everybody else who's a sworn officer who goes through this type of training, participation is required. You have to demonstrate skills. They're an employee of somebody. There's somebody else who sets the standards. Deputy sheriffs. We have guys come in, and we have the same issue. They show up, there's a PT requirement at Deputy Sheriff Academy. And the board just changed, it's now an entrance. So day one, you show up, you take a PT test, you pass, you're in the academy, you fail, you're out. But the point is, we have someone else who sets those standards and who's accountable. So for a constable, for you to show up to training and say, hey, I had shoulder surgery this year, I can't participate. We have to have a method for you for reasonable reasons to waive out or to accept that. With all the other programs, somebody else is saying you're physically fit and able to do these things in this training. With constables, the board tried to implement this early on. The biggest pushback was, well, I got to get a doctor to sign off. Who's paying for that? I got to pay for that out of my own insurance. We tried it for about 4 years, and it went nowhere. And doesn't mean the board can't revisit it. But ultimately, you're going to get back to that, your status as an individual.
And I recognize that, but no one's forced to go and take the training. And if the PCC is going to set a training and standards of qualification, then that should be part of it.
Right. I don't disagree with you, Rich. It's just, it's been a very frustrating thing to try and implement.
Yeah, and Rich, just to add to that as well, the board regulation does say demonstrate proficiency in each examination of practical skills.
Gentlemen, back
I'm sorry.
John Stevens from Luzerne County.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to question that training stats on page 10 on 2017. I was one of the 98 trained, and I have worked for a judge. So that 0 is not, I guess.
Was that in 2017 that you worked for the judge, or 2018?
Yes, ma'am. I received my certification last spring, and I worked last July.
Okay.
Now, just to counter what you said, I agree. Like, there's a lot of guys not working for judges, but when you have Constable Snuffy, who's been a constable for 30 years, and they have a lock on these MDJs. I mean, my MDJ in Plains Township, I played baseball with the guy. I can't get in this thing. I grew up with the guy. We were neighbors. I mean, the woman the judge I'm working for, if the office manager was not my godson's godmother, I wouldn't get any work from there. So you can't base, these guys aren't working for the judges. If these judges aren't giving you work because they have these other guys have locks on it, how can you hold that against the guy?
Well, where we're trying to get a handle on the numbers of training is on the surcharge side of things, because we know to keep the fund going, we got to have people out there working. Now, all this information that's going out is also going out to the DJs, because they need to recognize that the struggles that we're having here on this side also is those kinds of issues you're talking about. But unfortunately, those judges as elected officials have the right to decide who works and doesn't. And until that is addressed legislatively, all we can do as a training board is just roll with the punches that that we have right now. And I understand where you're coming from.
But to piggyback on what you said, because we're elected officials, this is where I disagree. I mean, there's some guys, they shouldn't be out there working. But again, you're an elected official and you're a independent contractor.
Yep.
All right? Where me,
That we're paid as an independent contractor, sets his wages.
Oh, we're not going to get into that.
Well, let's not get into that. But the fact of the matter is this: we're elected officials. We shouldn't be
a man from Brookville
for willing to take the risk.
Punxsutawney.
Paul Fake, Jefferson County, from Punxsutawney. What's the board doing to recoup the money that you're losing?
As far as
the $5.
Hey,
raising it to $10. If they're not, the magistrates ain't collecting it at $5. They're not going to collect it at $10. So what's the difference? Why raise it?
Right.
Yep.
Why aren't the auditors fining the judges for not collecting it, like they fine them for not putting a piece of paper in their file because they didn't recall a warrant in 90 days? Right.
That's up to the auditors. And this board we've met with AOPC back. Judge Opiello, when he became the board chair in 07 or 08, that was his pet peeve is the surcharge being assessed when it shouldn't? Is it the $5 and is it being collected? And PCCD and this board, we have no control over how it's assessed, when it's assessed, or how it's collected when it's collected. So in fact, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we asked for, AOPC gave us data for about 5 years. And how much of the surcharge was assessed, how much of it was collected, et cetera, over a 5 year by all the counties. And I brought forth to the board 6 counties, large, medium, and small. And the number one trend you see is if there's $180,000 assessed in our surcharge in that county, we typically only got about 40% or 50% collected in that year. It takes about another 4 years of that $180,000 to trickle in, and there's about 10% we never see for various reasons. So the point is, it's also too time lag. You go out and you're trying to serve something, that $5 assessed today. If you don't pick that guy up, or somebody else picks him up a year later, that's when we get that fee. So even though it's been assessed, we may not see that money for a year, year and a half.
Yeah, but there's counties that don't even collect.
But again,
isn't it by law they're supposed to?
Right. But we have no authority or no power to enforce any of that.
Then what's the auditors good for? Don't they? Isn't that what they want to know? Their money's going and who's paying what?
Hey, if I can respond to him real quick. We addressed that issue with the Special Judges Association at their legislative dinner. John Fishel from York County is the president of their association. And we said, look, we hear all the time about certain counties that are not collecting the fee, or certain judges. It was the recommendation from the Special Judges Association at their legislative dinner that if you have judges that are not collecting the fee, to inform Judge Fishel, to say, look, we're running into an issue where staff isn't collecting a fee. I'm just a messenger. Judge Fishel said, look, we will work our best to reach out to that judge to maybe re-educate them, educate their staff as to why they're not collecting that fee. So maybe that's a tool in the toolbox that you could try using.
Well, I mean, our county, I got them, they put it in automatic when they issue the warrant. We don't even have to collect it anymore. It's automatic. They put it in the $5 and the $18, the warrant fee. So when we get that warrant again or whatever, it's already, we don't have to worry about it anymore.
And keep in mind, if the county pays your fees for whatever reason, the surcharge is not, the county doesn't pay the surcharge. And also, too, there are a lot of other things that constables do for the court that under the act doesn't allow for the surcharge being assessed. And I know that's been discussed by you guys
Predator
when you get
transports,
legislative change,
considerations.
right? You know, if you're getting a court order to go over to the county prison to pick a guy up and bring, that surcharge isn't, but that's relevant to your training and what, you know, so there are other areas that when they first wrote this act, I don't think they considered, you know, they looked at civil and criminal and that was it.
But I mean, it's an ongoing thing. I mean, but raising it is not going to change it. It's not going to get you more money because they're not collecting it now.
Well, at some point, inflation, you know, dictates that $5 in 1994 doesn't buy us $5 worth of training in 2018. That's why, for us, we see the surcharge as a necessary part of it. But, and Mr. Merwin can attest to this, when I spoke in front of the commission, what did I get back from their legislative liaison guy? He said, the problem is, Craig, there's too many competing voices up on the General Assembly. We're confused as to what the constables want because we have all these different agendas that are being presented to us. So he said, basically, we haven't made a move. And then he pointed at the state police commissioner and said, you know, you need to be like these guys, 4,500 people with one voice. And my response to that was, it's like trying to grab a fistful of Jell-O when you're dealing with independent contractors. I know Ron doesn't like that word, but independent contractors, that's what we're dealing with. So for the time being, what I need is a ceasefire amongst the organizations, and I need everybody dedicated to a one-page, $5 increase in our, you know, get it from 5 to 10. We need that as one voice only, and all these other competing interests need to be sidelined for now until we get the money for the training, because this is the organization that was tasked with providing training to keep you guys certified, and unfortunately now with the Supreme Court rules, it says you got to be certified to do prisoner transport. You got to be certified to go serve civil process. We lose the certification, we lose the ability to work on the court side. So we got to fix that, and that's why this whole exercise, this short term, is going to be very painful for everybody. But we've got to do that because was that not what the man said to us?
Well, and I agree with you because look at everyone here. We're all constables, but we all have different patches. We all have 3 different organizations. We're bucking each other instead of working together.
So the county sheriffs are the distance.
You know, I mean, we're our own worst enemies on a lot of it.
Sir.
Constable Reynolds, Northumberland County. Why are we waiting to send this letter up for other things? Can't we send a second letter? This letter that we're waiting to send up about getting the regulatory increase in the surcharge. Why are we waiting for more action items to be added to it? Can't we send a second letter?
Well, here's what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that they want us to demonstrate that we've done everything possible under our realm to cut costs to get the budget in line. And once we've exhausted that and done that exercise and shown them concrete evidence that we did all the things that we can do here in order to bring this budget into line from 2.2 to 2.3 down to 1.5, 1.7, wherever that ends up being, that we've done that part because for the General Assembly to give us consideration to a fee increase, they want to see that we did due diligence. We did due diligence to bring this program, this budget
But they
in
can
line.
increase the JCAT fund just like that, but they can't increase a $5 surcharge since 1994.
I mean, this is what, gentlemen, let's face it. This is, and ladies, this is the politics of what we're dealing with. You know,
It's like mating elephants. It takes forever to get results.
Hey, folks, I appreciate it. We're going to call into it. We're going to continue this conversation in August. One more guy, and then we're going to call it day. Sorry.
Barry Kraswitz, Monroe. 3 quick things. This short constables training working for courts. I went to my base in 2016. I'm working for a court. I know at least 2 of my classmates are working for a court. So I know there's at least 3 people from one class. So
Yeah, these numbers, what AOPC fed us as numbers went through their system.
Well,
So
those numbers are not accurate. So
we'll go back to AOPC and we're going to ask them to readdress that to take a look on the database.
Right. Second thing, your firearms training chart. Yeah, it's all over the place, but we're right next to the bottom. So we do need to get raised up. It's next to the bottom, so a good place for people who work alone. It's just not safe. And third thing with the Con Ed classes you guys approved. Yeah, I don't see why you went through the whole process because you basically approved what you already done. So I just gotta wonder why approve what you already did if you already did it. Those are my 3 comments.
Okay. So I have a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So send it.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Constable, next meeting's August 9th. Be here. Since you're here today, bring a friend.
You have that big wallet.
And the numbers go in the back. So are they doing? No, they never got the insurance. They never even got the insurance.